Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Webinar Wednesday. This is Linda Jackson, and I'm coming to you live from Johannesburg, a very chilly Johannesburg in South Africa this morning. We would love to have you with us for the next hour and a bit. So make sure that you are snuggled up if you're sitting in the Southern Hemisphere. For those of you sitting in the Northern Hemisphere, I'm sure it's a bit warmer. Perhaps you have a cool drink while we have a cup of coffee. It's great to have you with us this morning. And so thank you so much for taking time out of your Wednesday to be with us and to be with Food Focus. And we would really like to thank the British Standards Institute for sponsoring this webinar today. And it gives us a great opportunity to chat to a very, very well-known speaker. I think she's a bit of a celebrity, actually. And I can't wait to chat to Dr. Loan Jesperson about food safety culture. Thank you to the BSI for the opportunity to be able to have this conversation today. And in the background, I do have Kelly Mulholland, and she's the food sector leader for BSI South Africa, and she will be chatting to us a little bit later as well. Loan is the founder and the principal of Cultivate. She has spent the last 15 years of her life in trying to make the food industry a better place. And most importantly, she's been trying to see how culture impacts on food safety performance. She has a PhD in culture-enabled food safety, and she has an amazing network of collaborators in the food supply chain. She's got a master's in mechanical engineering, and this degree she originally obtained from Syddansk University in Denmark. She then has her Master of Food Science from Guelph University in Canada, and she has her PhD from the same institution. She's currently the chair of the Food Safety Culture Working Group at the GFSI, and they are busy working on how we can characterize and quantify food safety culture across the entire global industry with respect to food safety culture and what we can do to improve our food safety management systems. So great to see you, Loan. Thank you so much for being with us. As you can see, everybody, she's live with us today. You can see the signal quality is not that good, so we're going to switch the camera off, but we're going to give the stage to Loan. Thank you so much, Loan. We really can't wait to hear from you. All over to you.
Thank you so much, Linda. And thank you very much to you and BSI for organizing the webinar today. It's very clear that a culture of food safety is a topic that there's much interest in these days for all the right reasons. And what we wanted to do today was give you a little bit more information about what is the impact of maturing food safety and quality through your cultural performance. We also want to just talk a little bit about what does it mean to go from checking the box for food safety to driving food safety change. And also, what is it that you can all do tomorrow when you pick up some of these learnings and can create change starting tomorrow in your organizations? Before we move on, I also just wanted to highlight what Linda has already said, that this is really put on in partnership between BSI and Cultivate. We've just launched a series of training courses together on the topic of food safety culture, and I really encourage you to reach out to Kelly Jane as your BSI contact in South Africa to learn more about those courses. It wouldn't be right of me not to let you know as well who Cultivate is. So we're a small boutique consulting agency. It's a Swiss company, and all we do across the globe is to help build understanding, measure and nudge, and create change and sustain food safety through culture. So we do a lot of leadership workshops, we do assessments, so we measure culture in companies, and we also work with regulators to figure out what their role is in food safety culture. And then it's of course the ever most important. It doesn't matter how many degrees we have or how many resources we have, it's about changing. It's about creating change and sustaining that change for food safety through your culture. We are absolutely blessed with having a fabulous network of clients and partners globally, some very, very large organizations with up to 900 sites globally, down to that 5-man band in Northern Victoria, Australia, who makes the best goat cheese in the world. But let's dive into the topic. When we talk about food safety, we have to become really confident and about talking about the psychological anchors that are really, they're set in our minds and they're anchored into something that we do every day. It's a psychological phenomena that we all carry around with us. It's a way for our brain to not overheat from having to react to all the signals that we get every day. So, for example, we drive down the road, we see a traffic light, most of us slow down. We don't actually necessarily have to think about taking the foot off the pedal or starting to brake. Our brain does that because it's anchored in our brains to do so. It's like putting on our pants every day, one leg at a time. We don't think about lifting the foot off the floor and putting it into the one trouser leg and then the other. Something that's anchored into our brain that we just do automatically. Anchoring is something that we can very constructively use when we talk about food safety as well. Because food safety in food companies is something that should be as simple for everybody as putting on your pants every day, one leg at a time. Anchoring is also something that can create some really big challenges for us, and in worst case, it can create tragedy. I had the great pleasure of working in a Canadian organization, and I know this is a story that many have heard before, but it cannot be told enough. Maple Leaf, one of the best organizations that I've come across in my professional career, is really an organization that takes what it does very serious with great passion. And in 2008, we were hit by one of the biggest tragedies that you can imagine. We had 23 of our valued consumers who passed away because we had sent out sliced meat in the marketplace contaminated with Listeria monocytogenes. This is a tragedy that I know is going to be very personal to some of you in South Africa because of recent events. What's really important here is that when it comes to the anchors in Maple Leaf at the time, leading up to our incident, we had made some assumptions that food safety was something that very technical people took charge of, and it lived largely within the group of those technical people. So our organization had hired some of the best technical people that we could find, and everybody was trusting that they took care of food safety. Our board of directors did not see food safety or act on food safety very often, because it wasn't something that was measured and integrated into how the performance of the overall business was evaluated. It was also something that our regulators had really, they were enforcing the regulations, of course, in all our plants, and we had 67 of them at the time, but they had come to acknowledge that sometimes we would find Listeria in our meat plants, we would take action, corrective action to remove it, we'd go back and test it had gone, and they would be happy. Nobody really pushed, whether it was from within Maple Leaf or from the regulator side, nobody really pushed us to say, yeah, but why was it there in the first place? Are you sure that it's not going to reappear? Where did it even come from? How did it get inside the four walls of this plant? So we all these anchors around food safety is a technical issue. Food safety is not talked about and integrated into the business performance that was reviewed by senior leaders, and regulators were certainly also happy with the corrective actions that we have taken. So when we anchor food safety into an organization making food for others, we have to really be careful in knowing what they are. So where we currently anchored our food safety assumptions, where do we need to lift and shift and drop the anchor anew to make sure that nothing happens to those that trust us every day? So we're going to talk a lot more about that. I want to just share a couple of thoughts with you as well around the impact of mature food safety and quality culture on business performance. Because one thing is that we obviously look at food safety culture and food safety behaviors because it's the right thing to do. It's right to mitigate risks from reaching our consumers. But also, we have to acknowledge, and especially as technical people, have to acknowledge that there's also impact on our business by looking at our food safety culture. Linda mentioned that I had the pleasure of chairing the technical working group for GFSI. And one of the evidence of the business impact of food safety is the integration of culture into the GFSI benchmarking standard. As part of the deliverable to the board of directors at GFSI was that we had to come up with a definition of what is a culture of food safety. And we came up with that culture of food safety is the shared values, norms, beliefs that affect mindsets and behaviors towards food safety in, across, and throughout the company. I want to just hit on a couple of words in the definition that I believe is really important when we talk about anchors and changing food safety cultures in companies. It is what we share. The reason why it's important that share is in this definition is that when we join a new group of people, if I'm joining a new food company in South Africa tomorrow, I'm working on the line, I might be a supervisor or I might be the plant manager. There are some assumptions, some values and norms and beliefs that are shared with me as the way that we do things around here. And if those shared values, norms and beliefs have not been looked at to say, but do they drive the mindsets and behaviors that we're looking for when it comes to protecting our consumers through food safety, then we can actually be passing on some of those shared values, norms, and beliefs that can lead to cases like what we saw in Make Believe. It's not because people come in and wanting to do something wrong or hurt people. It's just this is how we do things around here, and therefore we pass it on. We share it with new people coming in. The other thing that it's affecting, so it's affecting mindsets and behaviors. So if I can give you a little story, where I was in a plant in Australia, there were two people working on the line. One had a red hairnet on, the other one had a blue one on. Red in this company meant that I was in training. They were there to sort and look through leafy greens on a conveyor belt. The person with the red hairnet bent down, wanted to pick up some leafy greens that had landed on the floor. Bindi, who had the blue hairnet on, seasoned worker in this particular factory, she quickly slapped the red hairnet's hands and said, "You're not allowed to do that because we're not picking up anything from the floor because it could be contaminated." And then she scolded her. She was affecting her mindset and behavior because she was reminding her, she was nudging her in a very firm way, mind you, that Bindi knew this was not right, and she was affecting the mindset and behavior of her colleague, her new colleague, from the very get-go by saying, "We don't do this, and here's why." So think about that as you think about your culture of food safety in your organizations or those that you work with, that we're getting down to some really deep-lying values, norms, beliefs, and how they impact the mindsets and behaviors of those around us. And this definition could be used in everyday life for sure. So I wanted to share this with you as well, because I'm very excited that in Seattle in February this year, GFSI launched benchmarking 2020. So that's the new benchmarking standard against which the SQFs, the VRCs, the FSSC 22000s of the world is going to have to be benchmarked. And in this benchmark, we now have a clause around food safety culture. And in this particular FSM2, as I have on the screen here, it says, "This shall include elements of food safety culture at a minimum consisting of communication, training, feedback from employees, and performance measurement on food safety and related activity." So now we have a clause in the GFSI benchmark. So we're going to see in all of the benchmark standards out there that some of you might be certified to, or might help others get certified to, that there is going to be a specific request or requirements for food safety culture, and is on these particular points that GFSI now have in the benchmarking standard. I mentioned business impact. Some of you might have read this particular HBR, Harvard Business Review article, "Creating a Culture of Food Safety." It came out in 2014, so it's getting a little long in the tooth, but we can change that. But what they found through some global studies was that if you have a strong culture of quality, you'll also see 54% less mistakes. So now we come out of, we need to manage food safety and improve food safety culture because of risks, but we certainly also need to do that because we're making less mistakes, and that also influences the risk, but it also influences how much it's costing us to actually run our operation system. The way we look at it, and I've apologize if some of you have seen this one before, but cultivate, we look at culture maturity. Because when you think about those beliefs and attitudes that are impacted by values in your organization, that's a dynamic entity. So your organization is constantly moving, constantly evolving. So you might have some new values tomorrow, and hopefully they last for a long time. But as human beings, when we get together in groups, we tend to just keep improving and looking for new things. So culture is a dynamic entity that has to mature over time and with your actions. It's also an entity where you need to look at that it's not only about maturing, it's also preventing that your culture deteriorates. So the way that the model works is we have 5 stages, as you can see, stage 1 to 5, and each of them has some very fine details in our maturity model. And feel free to drop into our website and grab a copy of it. It's available to anybody for just download. But you can use it to say, in a state, if we are in a stage 1, there's descriptors in the maturity model that would say that you largely take action on food safety because somebody else is telling you to. It could be a regulator, it could be a customer, it could be a consultant coming in and saying, hey, you're at risk here. If you're in stage 2, there's descriptors in the model and the maturity model around how you're reacting. Stage 2 is also where you have those very strong technical departments. So food safety and quality people are really strong in the stage 2. What unfortunately is also happening in the stage 2 typically is that food safety and quality largely lives within that function. It doesn't necessarily take a life on in manufacturing, in finance, in product development or procurement. It's really housed and owned by food safety and quality. And as we know from the Maple Leaf case and from other cases, it is a risk if you're relying on just that one group, because we can't possibly be the ones that are policing everybody else to do what is needed for food safety and quality. There has to be ownership because they know what to do. And that's what we see in stage 2. We see companies who really know what to do. We see that manufacturing has been trained, there's learning programs so that they have specific to their roles and what they can influence in manufacturing. They know what to do with food safety and they own it. The same in finance, the same in procurement, the same in product development. In stage 3, the company has invested in making sure all functions have their unique role in delivering safe food figured out and built into the learning program so that, again, the expectations are shared with new people coming in, and it's therefore affecting mindsets and behaviors. In stage 4 and 5, those are exciting places to be. We have measured now in almost 80 companies across the globe with over 4,000 plants now, and we have seen nobody in stage 5. So you might ask me, okay, so does that mean that it's too ambitious? And no, it's absolutely not. It is the speed of change in the food industry that we will get there, but it's also about the individual organization taking those baby steps so that we're not trying to make a move from 2 to 5 in the course of a year. The companies we work with have become very good at taking baby steps so that they move into, say, stage 3, they cement that change, and then they start working towards stage 4. I'll share a couple of cases with you shortly, and I'll show you how some of how these 2 particular companies have driven some change, but also a little bit about how long time it's taking for them to change. Business impact can also be measured in the form of cost of quality. And what I like about the maturity model, again, is that we can take so I'm referencing Crosby here and his good work from 1972. I said before that an article from 2014 was a little bit long in the tooth, so you got to wonder what a 1972 is. But it doesn't matter if the principles still hold. And if you go into the American Society of Quality, they have also done some very interesting research in the cost of quality arena. And they all point in the same direction. And that is that if you are in that lower stage of maturity, say stage 1 or 2, 18 to 20% of your hard-earned sales money is going to go towards cost of quality. And that's because when you're in those lower stages maturity, you might hold more product, you might discard more product, so you throw out more product. You might have more verification activities, so you're checking the checkers who is checking the checkers, because again, food safety lives mostly, if you're lucky, within the food safety department, and that department is now trying to check on everybody else, and that is awfully costly. So you're actually putting a lot more of the money that your organization is working hard to earn towards cost of quality with very little return. If we then look at the other end of the scale, so 3, 4, and 5 maturity, we're seeing 2.5 to 12% of your sales money, your income, your revenue that goes towards cost of quality. So there's a really good connection between how mature your organization's culture is to how costly it is for you to run your food safety and quality systems. And I'll share and I'll send it over to Kelly Jade and Linda. We put out a publication in Food Control, I think it was early last year, and it's all about financial gain through maturing your food safety culture and a couple of cases. So if you're interested in this particular topic, do let me know. I think it's a wonderful measure if you're at a certain stage of maturity for also engaging your leaders ongoingly. Now, I mentioned before that what we're trying to teach in these BSI Cultivate courses is that we're trying to teach people to move away from checking the food safety box to creating food safety change. One of so we've now trained, and Kelly Jade is one of them. We've trained 62 BSI tutors across the globe to deliver these courses. And a big part of the course is really this notion of change. And there was one of the tutors who asked me in one of the earlier courses and said, "Malone, help me understand what is the difference between having our food safety system and then talking about culture." And largely it's about change. So we can put procedures in place. We've done that for a long, long time, and we can get audited against those procedures. And we can check the box by saying we passed an external audit. If we go to say that we now want to make sure that everybody's mindsets and behaviors are aligned to always delivering on those procedures, that's one thing, but also to raise their hand and say, hey, I understand this procedure, but I'm not sure that it's really doing what it is that we needed to do. And I've seen this be a little different when we're running these types of products. So do you think we should change the procedure so that we have all of that included as well? That behavior and mindset, the behavior of raising an issue, where we'd be willing, have a mindset of saying, I need to talk about this because I think it can help us get better. That behavior, that mindset, that's about changing the assumptions of your culture to enable everybody to raise that kind of questions and to have that kind of mindset. So when we're talking about food safety culture, we're talking about change management. And that's really what we're trying to also teach in the BSI Cultivate courses. We're trying to say that you need to be able to, in order to change your culture of food safety, drive successful change. That's really at the very key of this. I'm referencing a couple of points from Cotter here. Some of you would have read some of his work. And he's talked to us for a long, long time that about 70% of all change initiatives fail to deliver what they set out to do. So they never really materialize the either financial gain or the lowered risk. And it has largely to do with that the change wasn't set up to actually be successful. Successful change has four components to it, and again, we have much more about this in the training course. It's about building a guiding coalition, and a guiding coalition is not your leadership team. It's not your HACCP team. The sheer nature of guiding coalitions is that it's a group of people who can influence others. A group of people that others respect. It could be a frontline person, it could be one of your supervisors, it could be your plant manager, it could be your CEO. But it's a group of people that can help say, this is important to us, and they can guide the change for your food safety culture ongoingly. It's also about making the change in your culture a priority for your company. So it's not about standing up and saying that food safety is important to us. Of course, it's important to you if you're in the food industry. What else should be important to you than food safety? I'm sort of inclined to say. But about changing your culture is a priority. So it means that somebody is saying, do you know what? We realize that we don't have the perfect culture. We know that we're working hard and we're blessed with a good workforce. and now we're moving to the next level. This is where the concept of maturity is a really positive message for your teams, because it's not about saying that somebody is doing something wrong. It's about saying that we've gotten to here, now we're going to the next stage, and this is what the next stage looks like. It's about introducing change. It's not about saying you're wrong and now we're going to be right. It's about saying we're good and now we're going to be great. It's making that kind of ongoing priority for your company. Then it's about making it relevant and creating ownership. And I mentioned before that when we get into those stage 3 companies, then we see a finance person who is more than happy to share how he or she is actually the one that keeps all the food safety data and makes sure that it's being analyzed and incorporated into the report that everybody looks at as for the performance of the company. Now that's something that finance person has ownership and is very relevant because it fits into their role. So when you drive change in your culture, make sure that it's actually the analysis has been done up front to say who needs to do something different here, who are we asking to change their behaviors and mindsets, and how do we now make this relevant and create ownership? And then you make it visible. You put all of the posters on the walls of the great faces of people who are actually really good at creating this kind of change. You put their faces on the wall and you celebrate them because you want to be proud of all of those colleagues around you who are actually making this change happen. When we look at change and working with companies at Cultivate, we look at these 5 dimensions. There are also the 5 dimensions you'll find in the GFSI position paper. And the reason why these 5 is that it's built on, so I did an analysis throughout my doctoral work of 8 different cultural assessment systems, looked at what they all measured, and then tried to cluster them into common areas. And these 5 dimensions comes from that. So we look at a dimension around vision and mission. We look at one around people, adaptability, consistency, and hazard and risk awareness. Vision and mission is all about whether food safety is built into what your company's strategy is, what your values are, and how you're driving the company longer term and where you're going. People is around learning. It's about how you're managing consequences. So remember, consequences are positive and negative. And we'll talk about that in the course as well. And how you best structure reward and recognition systems. Adaptability, how you react to change, or do you overreact? Are you really good at changing every day to a new direction? And what does that do for your food safety performance? And consistency is around your systems, your data, how you're leveraging technology. But it's not whether you have them in place, it's how you're making decisions. Are you proactively looking ahead and that sort of thing? Hazard and risk awareness comes right down to the fundamentals of food safety. And I mean, we all love hazard on this call. We've got to make sure that everybody else has a very, very flourishing love affair with hazard as well, because what's not to love and what's not to love about knowing how we in our individual role actually impact the hazards and risks that we deal with specifically to our organization. So when we measure for food safety and culture, food safety and quality culture, we measure across these 5 dimensions. So let me share a couple of cases with you. So here's the first case. It's an early maturity company. And when we went in and measured first, they had an average maturity score of 2.2. So they're right in that second stage of maturity, which is called react. And we saw that they had the lowest scores in the vision and mission dimension, and then followed by the people dimension. We set out to make change in 3 dimensions with them when we helped them with their action plan. We wanted to create some change in vision, mission, people, and consistency was some. We thought when we started working on the other 2 that we'd probably see some change in consistency as well. The first thing we did was to go in and say, so now what are the anchors that what do we need to shift to be able to create change in these dimensions? And we said the first one is leaders walk the talk because they know and share their unique role in food safety. So we wanted to be able to see this behavior once we came back and remeasured. So that was the first anchor. We wanted to lift it, that leaders went from not really showing their unique role and not walking the talk to the extent we were hoping for, to now we would actually physically see it in their behaviors when they came back. The second anchor we wanted to shift was leaders take accountability for ongoing food safety rhythm to affect habits. And I'll talk to you a little bit about what we mean by that, by rhythm. The walking the talk, we measure in this score, and Kelly, and I share this paper with you as well around the measure that we use for walking the talk. So we measure walking the talk in a validated scale, and then we can plot them on the walking the talk. Whoopsie daisy. We can plot them onto this benchmark and say, okay, where are you at? And give them some guidance as for how can you better walk the talk. And this is where I come back to my point around bite size. You need to select just a couple of actions, and then you need to see them through, and you will see change like this. And it is remarkable what it does to the morale in your company if you go through with something like this. Let me just quickly, before we get into our answer session, share another case with you. This is a late maturity company. So they were, when we first went in, we had an average maturity score of 3.1. And as you can see again, the lowest score was in the hazard and risk awareness. And we really set in to say, okay, where do we need to focus to create change in this hazard and risk awareness area? And I'm sure you've all figured this out by now, but just to highlight as well, essentially what it's about in this wheel that we use to measure is that you want to have it all colored, right? So there should be no white inside this wheel. That means that you have a stage of maturity of 5 in all of your dimensions. So just a little side note there. So we set out to focus in this particular case on actions in hazard and risk awareness, people, and again, we expected that because of those two things, we would see an improvement in consistency as well. The two anchors that we wanted to shift and the behaviors we wanted to see when we came back and we measured was 1, food safety behaviors are shared across all levels and roles, and 2, everyone affect food safety risks by participating in the NIMIS program. So now we're getting really into the risk language, because again, it's a higher level mature company. We can actually talk about sharing and we can talk about risks. I'm going to share 2 tools with you that I believe you could also use if you are in this stage 3 maturity. One of them is something that I had the great pleasure. I was really honored to be part of this development with 3M. So 3M put out last year an environmental monitoring handbook in collaboration with Cornell University in the US, and we wrote a chapter 7, driving meaningful change in your organization through culture and environmental monitoring. Now we obviously focused on environmental monitoring because it's one of those programs that are almost at the center of most food companies. And we said, you know what? We have the dimensions, so those are the same that we've talked about all along on this call, mission, values, people, etc. And then we said, okay, what are some of the tactics that could be applied to drive what kind of target behavior? And you'll see more detail about this in the handbook. You can download, I put the reference in here. You can download the handbook for free on 3M's website as well. And there's some really good stuff in there about EMP in general, so I really encourage you to do that. But so let's do an example here, mission and values. What we said was, if we go to the behaviors, leaders of all functions integrate food safety and environmental monitoring messages in their part of the communication rhythm. So this could be that the CEO in that quarterly meeting that Kigomi, the CEO there, has, they have a standing item where he also talks about environmental monitoring and how we're performing. It might not be necessarily about what are we finding. It could also be that that he's having some messages around it's really important for us to not just say that we didn't find anything and everything is good. It could be that he decides to put out the challenge to everybody. Let's do a swabathon quarter. Let's see if we can raise, we can find as much as possible out there, and then we're going to reward and recognize those that find the most. So in other words, it's not about putting a message out there saying that as long as we don't find anything, we're safe. In this case, he was actually trying to challenge the teams around him to say, gotta find something. If we're not finding anything in our environmental monitoring program, I'm questioning if we're looking hard enough, and I'm going to reward those that do. One of the tactics that could drive that kind of behavior is to integrate environmental monitoring into the company plan, business strategy, and business operation cycle. So this is again back to this first dimension is really about where is food safety. If I was to come in and have a conversation with you, your senior leaders, if I was to look at your business strategies, your websites, your values, how you're rewarding and assigning resources, where is food safety in all of that, and how are decisions made around integrating food safety? I'm not going to, for the sake of time, go through all of the different tactics here, but I really encourage you to have a look at the handbook and read some more about it, and let me know if you have any questions. There's some key lessons, and I'll sum them up in a second, but one is definitely around time. It does take time to create change around changing people's mindsets and behaviors. We all know this, we hear it all the time. But what does that actually mean, and what does that actually look like? And I hope I've been able to share a couple of cases that give a bit of insight into that. So let's look at what could you do tomorrow to improve your culture of food safety. And I'm just going to really quickly give you a couple of points on that. Set up a baseline and measure progress. Find a way, choose a way. I don't have any preference whatsoever, but find a way to measure where you're currently at with your food safety culture. It could be through your engagement surveys, if you do some of those for your company in general. Incorporate a couple of questions around food safety. It could be through your engaging. So we do assessments, other companies out there do assessments. Go find somebody that works well for you and that you can get a baseline. It could also be through your existing measures, and we talk about this in the BSI Cultivate course as well, that there's lots you can do with what you're already measuring, like your EMP scores, like your GMP audits, like your cost of quality, that can be an indicator of your culture of food safety as well. Select 2 actions per year that you want to focus on. Please do not go out and create action plans that are expected to be implemented in the next 12 months with a list of 16 actions, for example. Select 2 actions. Get consensus in your leadership team with those around you that have to actually change their behavior, that these are the 2 actions we're going to focus ironclad on for the next 12 months. It makes a really big difference to be focused on this particular agenda. Identify the anchors in your food safety and quality departments. We are sometimes the biggest challenge or the biggest stumbling blocks for changes in your culture of food safety. We, as in our food safety professionals, we have to also be able to say, we need to involve others, we need to invite everybody into the tent, we need to educate them, we need to help them take on their role in food safety. Drive towards functional and frontline responsibility. There's absolutely no sense in all of us on this call getting this particular message and how important it is if everybody around us and those that are actually touching our food every day before it goes out to our consumers have not been empowered and given the opportunity to own food safety. Lastly, incorporate the changes that you make into your food safety management system. So I see a lot of companies that have beautiful action plans for the culture of food safety. Then the person that was so passionate about it goes away, joins another company, and that action plan is just dropped, and I see no change. As a matter of fact, sometimes when we go back and remeasure, they're dropped down on the maturity scale. If you put a rhythm like Kagome has done for their company in play, put it into your food safety management system. So write up a procedure and say, here's our communication rhythm for our company. This is who does what when, and this is why. So that anybody that comes into your company, I go back to the definition of this very topic, is going to be onboarded into his or her responsibility because now it's shared, it's part of your management system. So make sure that you tie the knot on any of your changes by incorporating it into your management system. And then keep asking questions whether it's good enough. I want to just wrap it up with a little story about Carla and Ann-Marie. Carla and Ann-Marie, they own and run a small dairy in Victoria, Australia. It's called Holy Goat. And if you like goat cheese, you gotta go after this. It's good stuff. I've met this team of people. There's about 10 people at the dairy at Holy Goat, and I've met them a couple of times now. Been to their dairy, and one of the things that they do incredibly well is exactly my last point in what you can do tomorrow. They're very good at asking questions. they actually tell their employees very little. They ask questions. When I got there, I felt like I was run over by the question train because they had so many questions. As for, what do you think we do this? What do you think about that loan? Do you think we should do it differently? Where does that come from? And can you show us how we should do that? Or do you have any references so that we can learn more? There were so many questions from Carla and Ann-Marie, and I think one of the things that does is it keeps everybody just curious and constantly aware of that we have to work on our culture every day. Culture is like your own personal health and fitness. If you stop focusing on it, it's not going to get better. And culture is the same. You have to keep a focus on it. And Ann-Marie and Carla, they do that brilliantly, mostly through their inquisitive minds of asking questions and acknowledging that they do not have all the answers. Others around them can certainly help them. I'm going to end with that and hand it back over to Linda and Kelly Jade for questions. But thank you so much for your time and for your patience and letting me ramble on here, because it's a topic that I'll never grow tired of talking about. And if any of you have any questions, please do shoot them through.
Thank you so much, Lone. I'm going to open up the questions that we've received, and a very, very important question has come through here, Lone, and let's see what you think about this one. Is food safety culture auditable?
Yes. Do you want more?
Now, I think so, because I had a follow-on question to that, in that you showed us FSM2, which is obviously coming into the 2020 benchmark standard, and how would this, or how would that require differ, for example, from the current requirements within leadership in ISO 22000, the 2018 version?
So it's so just maybe a little bit more flesh on the bones for the first one. It is auditable because you don't necessarily, so people think about that you go in and audit what I believe, because as I just shared with you, food safety culture is about behaviors and mindsets and what I believe. You do look at how people obviously behave, but you're looking at signals of that, signs of that culture that's there. And that means that you're looking at, if you sit down with the plant manager during your audit and you're asking her, so what's your food safety performance? And that plant manager, she's struggling with pulling up any kind of data, or that plant manager, she readily flashes up a scorecard and can talk to you in detail about what's going on in the scorecard, where they have a mistake that had happened, what they've done to correct it. Immediately, you have a measure of culture. You can audit that behavior and that situation, from one where she doesn't know what she's supposed to answer. She gives the standard canned answer, to the other side, pulling up evidence showing that she knows the details and what they did when there was an issue. So it's absolutely, you can audit food safety culture, and that's also why those components in the GFSI benchmarking standard or benchmarking document 2020 will make a difference. If you want to learn more about that, about how to audit or how to do that, I'd also encourage you to, if you are a member of the International Association for Food Protection, IAFP, so I have the pleasure of chairing the professional development group of food safety culture there, and we're just halfway through, a little over halfway through a series of webinars. We've got 7 webinars, and yesterday we had a webinar, or the day before, a webinar by 3 very large retailers, Walmart, Loblaws in Canada, and Musgrave in Ireland, and they all talked about how they go about auditing culture and what they're doing around culture with this supply base. So yes, it's auditable, and yes, it will make a difference to have it in the benchmarking document 2020. So if you're an auditor, that's good information to have. If you're a company and you're looking to meet those requirements, that puts you squarely in that stage 2. So that means that you are a relatively early maturity company, and that's okay. It's okay. There's not a bad place to be on the maturity model. But it means that you are mostly focused on what external requirements are to create change. And again, it's okay, but use that to include your leadership. Use it to educate your supervisors and your frontline in their roles and responsibilities to take you to the next level.
Absolutely, and I think that's possibly one of the misunderstandings with respect to FSM2, and that is, although it is now becoming a requirement of the auditable standard, it's not just about reacting to that external stimulus within the organization. It's actually about making sure that as an organization we're doing this because we want to do it, and we're wanting to do the right things every day, not just because someone is ticking a box like you'd mentioned previously. In terms of the some of the things that you had mentioned with regards to frontline workers, so you've emphasized the importance of empowering frontline workers. But I'm sure that there are many people that are listening that would say that they're not always the problem. It's the leaders that are so business oriented, and they are only focusing on the bottom line, and food safety sometimes feels like an unnecessary detail. How do we get them on board?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that, and it's also true that frontline workers, what we tend to do is react to the culture that we're part of. We don't necessarily set the tone for it. So that's a very astute question and observation. There's a couple of things with senior leaders. Not everything's going to work equally well with everybody, but a couple of things that you can do. So I mentioned the anchor in the food safety and quality department itself. So there is a little bit of self-reflection that has to take place as well before you start to wonder what to do different with your leadership team. Maybe think a little bit about how you position food safety with your leaders. So if food safety is something that is reported out in a very technical, let's say EMP fashion, in a table that might be red, yellow, and green, but there's a lot of detail in it. Is that really a way that you think your leaders can best absorb the information, and can they best also understand their particular role in influencing the performance? So what I'm encouraging you to do here is do a little bit of reflection on, as food safety leaders, how do you speak food safety business, or do you speak food safety? And it's different because you can position food safety as a business, a needed business function, or you can position it as a scientific function. And if you want the attention of leaders that are not food safety leaders, then you've got to speak business. So that's one thing. The other thing is, look at something like the cost of quality. If you are in that stage 3 maturity or higher, I would suggest looking at cost of quality. It's just a good driver for integrating the food safety into what's it costing us today, and how can we improve on that by everybody doing a better job. The other thing is that if you are in stages 1 to 2, use cases of other companies where things have gone wrong. Because if you're in that stage 1 and 2, then it's about, to some extent, waking up your leadership team by saying, we are not managing our risks appropriately, and here's the evidence. And here's a couple of cases where things have gone wrong from other companies. So I get invited by a lot of companies in those stages 1 and 2 to just share our story, our Maple Leaf story. And it's not to scare anybody necessarily, it's just about putting the reality on the wall as for what can happen if you do not manage your risks appropriately. So I think go back to do a little bit of sort of introspection, think about your own leadership style, how you position food safety, maybe talk to your finance people. They're incredibly good at positioning information for senior leaders. Maybe they can help you better position food safety information. Second, if you're on a higher level maturity, start looking at your cost of quality. If you're lower level maturity, share some cases from other companies that they can relate to.
Great. So we have a question here with regards to the difference in the approach if we were to go bottom up rather than top down. So in your experience, is it which approach has proved to be more beneficial, by taking a bottom-up approach? So, you know, new employees are inducted or onboarded with food safety culture from day one, and kind of using the frontline empowerment, as opposed to trying to get the leaders to change. Do you think that the bottom-up approach is more effective?
No, I don't. And I think it depends. I think that the real answer is it depends. If you're in that stage 1 and 2, and I don't think necessarily you have to do a very detailed measurement to have a gut feel for where you think you're at. If you're in stage 1 and 2, you can do as much as you like at the front line, but you're still going to have some potentially contradicting messages coming from your leadership and contradicting behaviors as well. And in those earlier stages, you risk losing credibility, and you also risk having a lot of people that get very frustrated because they are onboarded into, if they're new employees, into thinking that some things are right, and then they actually get into the job, and now they're seeing reality that is actually something different. So in those earlier stages, you have got to get alignment from the leadership to say, what is it that we want to be when we grow up? If you're in those stages, late stages 3 and stage 4 and 5, then it's a two-way. Right? Then you come at culture from top and you come at it from bottom. And that's really powerful now, because now the unlock and the most important people when you get into those stages, especially 4 and 5, the most important people are your middle managers. So your middle managers, the supervisors who in a mature organization is there to make sure that their teams are informed, are empowered to speak up, actively take part in solving when there is a problem or an issue, and also are recognized for it. But they also take all of that information and now they feed it up into the strategic development. And that's what happens in those stages 4 and 5. That's where the middle manager is really key and very strong as well. So I don't think we ever get to a pure bottom-up. I don't think a bottom-up works. I don't think we've seen it from banking, from oil and gas, from safety. We haven't seen that sort of bottom-up work very effectively over time. But we do see a top and bottom sort of drive for it at the later stages.
So why does it take so long? When somebody's asking, you know, why is the delay? Is the delay the general staff attitude and the inertia that's associated with that, or is it a management problem? What's your experience in terms of, you know, what is more significant in the time that it takes to change a culture?
So about 2 years ago, I decided that I wanted to be a really good marathon runner, and I started running. And it took me about 6 months to get into a regular rhythm of appreciating getting out and running 6 times a week. It took me another 1.5 years before I could actually be somewhat comfortable in that this was now a new behavior, and I had a mindset around it that this was really comfortable and I loved it and it's a big part of my life. That's one person, one behavior, and it took about 1.5 years that I have absolute control over. So now you put 100 people in a food plant. You have 100 people's behaviors that you need to impact. We all come from different reference points. So some people will think that food safety is the most important piece because they've lost a loved one to an allergy reaction. Somebody else has never come across it and can't spell food safety. So now we have to align 100 people's behaviors and mindsets into one direction of that. Every time you think about taking an action or behaving in our food plant, you will consider food safety. The 1.5 years that it took for me to become a comfortable, proficient runner pales in comparison to the challenge of 100 people. But here's the thing, don't look at this long term. Don't look at 3 to 8 years. What you have to look at is every little change. So when you start to see, let's say you implement a rhythm of that every day, there's a conversation and it happens to include food safety in that frontline team of 5 people on the plant floor for about 5 minutes. The energy and the positivity that comes with that is just astonishing. And that's why I come back to, don't think about 3 to 8 years. Don't think about that food safety culture is something you're going to implement. Food safety is with you. If you're in the food business and you're manufacturing, you're serving food, you have a culture of food safety. You might not like it. It might not be very strong, but it's there. So think about what is it that you can do tomorrow as opposed to thinking about the 3 to 8 years. Don't think about that.
Absolutely, but I think the point that you've just made is really important, is that you've already got a food safety culture. It's not like you're going to go out next week and buy a new coat and put it on and you're going to have a food safety culture. There is already a culture within the organization that may be, you know, a positive one towards food safety, or it may be not as positive as we would like it to be, and therefore the need to change. I did also like the fact that you highlighted that if you're going to start changing, you've got to be consistent with that change, because if you're not really serious about changing, rather don't start, because it's going to be very, very difficult to motivate people to want to buy into you know, a change if you've let them down. A question about, is food safety culture the same in Australia as it is in, you know, Canada? I mean, you've worked all over the world, so is it the same? You know, do you find the same sort of basic human behavioral problems, or is there a regional aspect, you know, that is relevant and should be considered? Africa versus Asia, for example.
So I think there's so if we look at what the definition is, if we look at the dimensions, if we look at the maturity model, I think all of that can be transposed between countries, and that's how we use it as well. What's different is that Europeans learn different than North Americans. North Americans communicate different than Asian or people in Asia. Australians operate different when it comes to rewards and recognitions than potentially people in Africa. So it's about your tactics. So what you decide, how you decide to, let's say, recognize somebody for their action around food safety or for changing their behaviors. The recognition part of it might change or might be different. So if I'm in a food company in Hungary, there's a strong sort of pride in what people do in Hungary, and if you start to now recognize them for their behaviors around food safety by, let's say, increasing their salary or giving them a bonus, it's almost an offense, because, well, that's what I'm here to do. I'm doing a good job in this because that's what you asked me to do. A recognition for them could be, you're going to have 2 extra vacation days per year instead. That's more valuable to a person in Hungary, at least in our experience, than it is, say, if we go to the US. In the US, recognition is very monetary. It's very much about money, and that's okay too. There's nothing wrong in that. In Europe, some of the companies we work with, it's very much around giving opportunities to learn or take time off with your family. So I think, Linda, to your question, there's an influence of the national cultures or the prevailing national culture traits in a region that influences how you now go about changing. And that's what we've talked a lot about this with the 60+ BSI tutors, is that there's not one way of training this out with your people in your regions as for how do you create change, but there is one way as for what you should define it as, and what it being food safety culture, and what are the components of it.
Absolutely, agreed. Right, thank you so much, Lone. I'm now going to hand over to Kelly Jade because we would like to know a little bit more about where to from here. And I think, Kelly, if you, I'm going to now ask you to come online, so I'm unmuting you. Kelly, in terms of what the BSI is now doing and all the activities around this, we can't wait to hear from you, because you're obviously the food sector leader for BSI South Africa. and you've worked in the food industry for a long time. You've been in the trenches, so you know exactly how some of these things work. And now you're available to obviously assist companies that are going through this process, not only with food safety culture training, as we previously discussed, but also certification. So maybe you can just tell us a little bit about how this all works out and what people could expect from the BSI with regards to food safety culture and your other services. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Linda, and thanks to you and Food Focus for hosting us today. And also just want to say a special thanks to Lauren. Thank you so much for sharing of your knowledge on food safety culture with us. We really, really appreciate you taking the time out to speak with us, and also for sharing your passion of this topic with us all. Yes, as Linda was saying, food safety culture is obviously a very important topic to BSI, and we do have a BSI one-day understanding and improving your culture of food safety training, which was developed by Loan in conjunction with BSI to assist organizations in improving their food safety culture. So if any of the attendees today would like some more information on that training, please do let me know. Obviously, food safety culture forms a very important part of the GFSI benchmarked certifications like BRC, FSSC 22000. So it's very much a topic that's very relevant today. And then also just to mention that, as I'm sure some of you would be familiar with BSI's past standards, such as the publicly available standard PAS 96 regarding a guide to protecting and defending food and drink from deliberate attack. That's relating to food defense and TACIP. BSI is in the process of developing a PAS publicly available specification on food safety culture specifically, also to assist organizations. If any of your organizations would like to be one of the sponsors towards this development of this PAS standard, please also make contact with me. Other than that, when the PAS standard is also launched, it'll be a very good guide for industry to use towards their food safety culture as well. So that's it from my side. Thank you guys very much. Thank you to the attendees, for all of you, for joining us today. We really hope you enjoyed the webinar. We hope that you were able to take a lot out of it. And we look forward to assisting you on your food safety culture journey going forward.
Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for your time. And to everybody out there, I sincerely hope you enjoy the rest of Wednesday, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar Wednesday with Food Focus. Do take care.